Painting Games Workshop models is actually quite good fun, especially if it's from your favourite scenes from certain Lord of the Rings movies. But is there a more affordable way of getting your warriors that still look the part, as well as getting them painted pretty quick? Let's find out. I'm Peachy, and this is Peachy Tips. Now, initially, this video was meant to come out before Christmas to coincide with the War of the Rohirrim movie that came out, which made a lot of sense because I'm going to paint some Rohirrim guys in this video. And a guy got a bit carried away and made a Christmas present for me, and I made a video on that instead. So that kind of took precedence. But I'm here. It's the new year. It's new year, new army, they say. So let's look at painting some Rohan stuff. So it's been high time since I did anything Lord of the Rings related on this channel. And with the War of the Rohirrim coming out and my love for Rohan, because all the best scenes in the movies are Rohan, it made sense to paint something Rohan. Now, Rohan are cool. The models are cool. But you know, in this day and age, we want nice, affordable miniatures. So I thought I'm going to do a comparison. I'm going to get some Victrix unarmoured and armoured Saxons, as well as the official Games Workshop Rohan warriors, paint them up, do some side-by-side comparisons from a painting point of view, but also from a price and quantity point of view. And the results you might find quite interesting. But before we get into that, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to paint some Rohan warriors. I'm going to paint some Dark Age Saxons. I'm going to have a lot of fun. And I use the same colours. I'm going to do some speedy techniques as well, using the same highlight across the entire model. But also just show you how you can easily turn a Dark Age model to look a little bit more like a Rohan model. So let's have some fun and paint some figures. Now in this guide, I'm going to use two different sprays to get my guys started. Some green for some of the warriors and silver for those that have more armor showing. Nice and straightforward. Now for the ones I've sprayed green, what I am going to do is pick out any silver details first. So that's things like the scale mail, helmets, etc. Now I did super glue on the shield, so when it came to spraying, I'd get most things covered, but I can also easily snap it off and then pick out any details behind it if I needed to. Again, you don't have to do that, it's just something I like to do. Now I wasn't quite sure what to do with the helmet, so initially I just thought I'd paint that silver, and then I can decide as the painting progresses. And of course, don't forget the spear tips, etc. Now with that model done, I'm going to move on to my unarmoured Saxon. So again, picking out the helmet and any other details that feel that they should be silver or look like they should be made out of some form of iron or whatever. So I did the helmet very much like the Rohan guy. Again, those shields were gently tacked on with a little bit of super glue. Obviously there was nothing behind it, but I did need to pick out some silver on that spear tip. So it just cracked on that. It was nice and straightforward. That one was just a couple of bits of silver on that, man. Now for the model I've sprayed silver, I'm just going to do the opposite. I'm just going to get some camouflage green, which is kind of close to the death rattle green, and then just going to pick out any bits I want to have green. So that's any kind of like tunics or sleeves or trousers, shield or whatever. I'm just going to make my way around and pick those details out. To be honest, with the Fanatic paint, I only need to do one coat. It didn't really need more than that, so it was nice and straightforward. So next up, I'm going to pick out any wood and leather details. So I'm just going to go around on the Rohan guy, find anything that's going to be wood and leather. So that's boots, gauntlets, belt, the spear or whatever. Normally I like to pick them out in different colours for like the wood and the leather, just so it looks like they're made from different materials. But when you're doing speed and you're doing lots of figures, sometimes it's just easy to paint them all the same colour because most people aren't going to spot that or care. So I'm just going to go around picking out all the bits I need to. Again, I can change my mind as time goes on or pick a different colour for leather. Now with the shield, I did blue tack that to a separate paint handle. So all I'm going to do is just flip it around and then just pick out the back of the shield where all the wood detail is in a little bit of brown. So just using that same Brigadine brown that I've been using on like the leather and the spear. So again, just make sure, again, one coat's enough. Then moving on to the unarmoured Saxon, I'm just going to do the same thing, go around, find anything that's leather. So he's got like some big boots here with wrappings on it. Obviously the spear as well, so make sure I pick out that. And then he's got like a belt with lots of gubbins on it. So he's got like a dagger, he's got a pouch. I think I'll leave his hands so they can be painted flesh and not do them as like leather, but that's entirely up to you if you can't be bothered. Now it's pretty much the same story with the armoured Saxon, so I'm just going to go around picking out his boots, but he's also got some other things like his scabbard as well, so I need to make sure I pick that out. He's got some straps that obviously attached to that, so that's the belt as well as the strap going across his shoulder. Of course he's got the spear shaft as well to do, and the wood behind the shield. Now when doing the wood behind the shield, I chose to keep this glued on just so it can be quite awkward to get around those nooks and crannies. So if you do glue them on, just be mindful that sometimes it can be a little bit more tricky to see some of those details, but if you can't see it, then don't worry about it. Now a lot of the Rohan guys on the box art have a little bit of red or some kind of red or warm brown, I guess. So I've decided I'm going to pick some of those colours out on these models, just to add a flash of well, red to the model. It just looks nice. So I'm just going to go around picking those out, whether that's on tunics or trousers. Now I'm using Basilisk Red here. Again, only need one coat pretty much. Also on the helmets, I thought it'd be quite nice to pick out some of the leather work on the helmets as well. Kind of fits in with like Aimer's kind of look. His armor, he's got that nice red boiled armor. So I thought it would kind of match with that. It'd be quite nice. And it was at this point I decided, yep, I'm going to add that colour to the Rohan helmet as well. I think that'd be quite nice. And I probably will add gold later on to those details on the helm. And again with the armoured guy, I work my way around picking up the trousers, kind of matching with the unarmoured one a little bit. He's also got some details just behind his boots where you can just see a little bit of the trousers. So I thought, yeah, I'll quickly pick those out as well. And he's got this nice sort of leatherwork band that goes around the bottom of the mail. So I thought I'd just pick that out as well. Now the cloak on our official Rohan model, I'm going to pick out with some Guardian Green. Again, you could always use some masking tape from the other ones if you really wanted to, or you just add some of this colour to like shields maybe to break it up a little bit. Entirely up to you. But if you did want to mix them all together, then it'd be worth adding some of this Guardian Green somewhere on those other guys as well. That could be the bit of leather around the bottom of the chainmail, or just like I say, some trousers or different tunics. Entirely up to you. And again, it was just a single coat of Guardian Green over that undercoat. And then I applied some to the shield of the unarmoured guy. Thought it would be quite nice to add that kind of flash of colour in there as well. Now, when it came to picking out the flesh details on these Rohan guys, it kind of reminds me a bit of dwarves because mostly they've got big helmets on with beards. So there's very little real estate with the flesh. So you just have to be a little bit sort of like mindful about that. So picking out what you can see, so like cheeks and lips. Obviously with these guys, I can pick out the hands as well if I decided not to paint them as gloves. But yeah, there's not a lot of flesh. So I'm not going to go super mad with the flesh on these. Just a nice base coat of barbarian flesh in places. And then I can add some beards later, which is what I'm doing here. I'm going to use some Tomb King Tan. It's a nice light blonde Rohan-esque hair colour, so I thought I'd just go around and pick out all the Rohan hair with this. Obviously with the official Rohan guys, they've got like the mane of hair coming out the back, but with some of the Victrix ones, you also have the option to add that as a detail as well, so you can add some hair to the back of them, but most of them tend not to. They've just got beards, so I thought I'd pick that out on the unarmoured one. He's also got some eyebrows as well, so I thought I'd add a little bit of extra colour to that face. And he's got some fur bits as well, some nice frilly bits around his wrapping, so I thought I'd pick those out in the same colour as well, just to add a little bit of interest and different texture to the model. And our armoured one, he has quite a nice forked beard, so I thought I'd pick that out too. Now for only shield design, so on the Rohan ones, they have nice sculpted designs, which is beautiful. So I'm just going to get myself some Brigade Grey, slightly thinned down. I'm just going to work my way around. I'm kind of using the edge of the brush a little bit here, so that's not like the tip of the brush because there's a chance of getting that onto the woodwork, but if I just use the edge slightly, then it just helps me pick out those embossed details that are actually on the shield. It also occurred to me that that bit across his chest should probably be leather after looking at the box art, so I thought I'd pick that out in brown as well. So sometimes that happens, you just don't notice or forget. Then any gold details, I'm just going to pick out with some greedy gold. So on the helm, I know I painted it all silver to start off with, but you know, it's fine because you can change and make choices as you go along the painting journey. That's what I'm doing here. I thought it looked better with a little bit of flash of gold or brass or bronze or whatever you want to use. So I'm just going to go around that on the helmet. And again, adds a bit of interest and warmth to the model. And he's got a little detail or roundel on his actual chest bit, that leather bit. And then the boss on the shield, just going to put that on the gold as well, or whatever metallic you use. And then just get on to the other two guys, just looking for any details that might be gold. So that's probably going to be belt buckles, details on the helmets, maybe the odd hilt of a weapon or some kind of furniture on the actual scabbard itself. And the unarmoured ones don't have a great deal. It's mostly the helmet because that's all they've really got is the helmet and maybe a belt buckle. Oh, of course, I suppose the boss on the shield. So I'll work my way around. Again, if I'm making mistakes, I can just tidy back up. It's not the end of the world. I mean, that's a great thing about paint if you make mistakes. And again, using the edge of the brush here, just working around the trim of the shield and of course the edges as well, because behind bits will be wood. So, you know, it doesn't matter if you do get a little bit of gold on the wood, you can always paint that brown again. And the same for the armoured one, just find any details that look like it should be gold. Again, that's going to be the belt buckle, that's going to be the helmet. So it's got some nice cheek guards there, which again, I'm just going to pick out all in gold, which then ties in with the other two guys. And then of course he's got his scabbard. So picking out the sword hilt and pommel, as well as any other details on that scabbard. And of course, lastly, the shield boss and trim of that shield as well. Again, ties in with the other guy. So it looks nice and, well, I say regimented, but it looks like it's made from the same weaponsmith or armourer. Then of course, I like to get myself some wash and apply that all over. So I'm using some Black Knight here. So I like to thin it down a little bit. So whether that's using medium or a little bit of water, Now, if you do use water, try not to use more than 50-50 because it tends to get a bit crusty in the cracks. So if you do want to go a little bit more thin down, then get some of the medium for that. But for this, it was only a little bit of water, didn't use that much. I'm just applying it all over. Now you will see there's some bubbly bits and it looks a bit frothy, but actually when it dries, it settles in those recesses and it just looks like shade. So again, I'm just going to do this all over, again from a speed point of view, because, well, paints all those shadows and darkness for you. But at the same time, you know, once you've done it and it's dry, you can leave your models at that. They've all been base coated, they've got a wash, they're ready for battle. Just get them based and get playing some games. Oh, of course, don't forget the shields. If you've got loose shields, don't forget those. Sometimes you can do that. However, if you want to go to the next step, I'm just going to do a dry brush all over of Tundra Taupe. Now, this is going to be over most of the colours on the Rohan guys. So that's going to be the cloak and all the other details around him, including the leather. So this is like the initial kind of highlighting stage if you want to do this. So I'm just going to use this same colour all over those details. Granted, they might get a little bit on some of the scale mail. I can just count that as dirt if I wanted to. But really, it's just a one-size-fits-all highlight across everything. And that's as far as you need to go if you wanted to highlight your models. You can leave them at that if you did want to take them to the next step. Again, be mindful not to get on the silver areas, but it's not the end of the world if I did. But it really does help punch out the leathers. Gives that green a little bit more of a worn, dirty kind of look as well. And again, on those shields, do that. And if you got like white details or red details, it will look a bit frayed and old. So that's also quite a nice little touch. And just flip them around and of course do any woodwork with that same dry brush. Just an old army painting technique. Now for a little bit more, well, life to that flesh, so without being too dark and drab, I'm going to apply some Crusader skin. I'm also going to add it to the gold as well because I feel that gives it a little bit more bling and a little bit more richness. But yeah, just work my way around adding some wash to the gold, the flesh, and in some places if you want to, just some of the red. Just thought it looked quite nice on the red. I think some of that dry brushing had made it a little bit too light, so I thought I'd add a little bit of this wash over that and it kind of settled it back to looking a little bit more reddy, because that is sometimes the downside of a dry brush. It can remove some of that colour and look a little bit washed out. And again, any shield bosses or details on the actual shield as well, just go around and do those. Now, from a highlighting point of view, if you wanted to go a little bit more, I'm going to get the same Tundra Taupe that I use as the dry brush all over, but I'm just going to be a little bit more concentrated on where those highlights are. So on the folds of the cloth, I'm just going to work my way around using that same highlight. Again, it's the same highlight across most things, so I could add this to the red and use this on the leather work. Beyond this Rohan guy, I'm just going to pick out that slightly darker green cape or cloak, and then of course his tunic as well. Again, I'm just doing the old jaggedy highlights here because it gives it that kind of torn, worn look. Yeah, I want the clothing to look a bit rough because, well, Rohan, the weather conditions can be a bit rough in places, a bit windy, not very pleasant, so things are going to get tatty a bit. And of course they're, you know, kind of not poor people, but they're not got rich armor like Gondor. Can add some little scratches to the cloak as well, just make it look a little bit frayed and old. And again, just work my way around onto the leather work. So again, you don't have to go this far if you don't want to. That dry brush all over would have done a lot of the leg work here, but because I want to go a little bit more on this guy, I thought I'd just get some Tundra Taupe and just do some extra highlights. But yeah, for a lot of the time, I do like to use the same highlight across most of the colours on the model. It kind of just ties it all together and makes it look a little bit drab in places, which kind of is nice and fitting, especially for historical stuff or Lord of the Rings themed stuff. Yeah, just take your time. Have some fun. Now, in some places for the faces, I am just going to pick out with a little bit of barbarian flesh here and there. I'm not going to go mad because there's hardly anything. A little bit of cheek sticking out, maybe the odd lip. And with these guys, they've got like obviously the fingers hanging out, so you know, just pick some of that out. But like I said, you don't have to go particularly mad with the skin on these. You could just leave it as it was before if you really wanted to. And if you find that your beards are a little bit drab or the wash has knocked them back a bit, then you can just get some of that Tomb King tan and then just pick them out a bit. Also notice this guy's got like a little detail around his collar, so I thought I'd pick that. I also noticed I didn't paint his neck, but we'll just pass over that. You didn't see that. And of course, add some highlights to those little bits of fur around his boots. Of course, any hair on our Rohan guy as well. Normally you could dry brush this, but I thought because they're quite straggly little bits of hair, I could just like use the edge of the brush in places and pick them out. The downside of dry brushing is it's only a small area of hair, so you could get on the green, you could get on the metallics. So that's something to be mindful of. And just add a little bit of bling to my metallics. I'm just going to go around. On the scale mail, I thought it'd be quite nice just to pick out the odd section here and there. Just add a little bit more lightness to the actual spear tips as well. So just work my way around on those. And of course, any like chin guards or little bits of silver that could do a little bit more love. I'm just going to go around and do that. And if you want to get yourself an old brush and just dry brush up some of that chainmail, if you've got the armoured ones. Now I'm going to get some grim black. I'm just going to drop it into things like the eyes and the mouth, just to add a little bit more definition. So, well, you can actually see some detail there on the eyes. It's not too flat or a little bit washed out or whatever. And again, like around sleeves and stuff where it looks like it could do a little bit more depth, or some areas that just you haven't quite got that kind of border between the two where the wash might not have settled enough. And sometimes it's quite nice just to get a little bit of black or brown, dark brown, and just add a little bit of a border there for you. Again, that's just something I do as a little cheat. Sometimes the wash doesn't always do the work you need it to do, or it just needs a little bit more love. Also thought actually I could pick out his sleeve here with a little bit of black. You won't even see it. The shield be in the way. Don't even know why I bothered. Now this guy, I did go a little bit heavy with that black, so what I did was got another brush, dried it off, and just soaked up some of that excess. But actually with that style of helmet, it's going to look dark and shady anyway, so it's not really the end of the world if you don't see any flesh details in there. And then for this guy's shield, I did decide in the end, after seeing that kind of like lighter green on this shield in comparison to the cloak, I thought it could do with that guardian green on the shield as well. So I just thinned down a bit of guardian green and just worked my way around. Again, if I made any mistakes, I can go back over with some white on that actual embossed detail, the Rohan sun design. Now for something a little bit different, I am going to add a different type of decal onto one of those shields. Now this is from Little Big Men Studios, which you can get via Victrix. So Victrix supply a load of shield designs and decals for the relevant models in their range, which is amazing. So that's what I'm going to do now, is add some of those. Now for those Victrix shields, I'm going to get myself a couple of like shield designs. Now these ones are for the Russ. I could use them for the Russ. There are different ranges of models and they have different like designs for different shields, so do get the right ones. But I know these will fit because they are that Saxon kind of vibe. So I just made sure it was the right size to the shield I'm going to be using it for. I'm just going to go around and snip it. Now with these particular decals, they have like a bit of a sticky kind of plastic over the top of it, so you do have to cut them to the shape that you want. I do like the fact that the boss in the middle is already removed, which is pretty good. So you just remove that clear little bit of sticky plastic and then you place it face down onto the area you want it to be. So on the shield, got it face down, and then it's just a matter of using some water, work your way around. So just I do a couple of bits of water just so it soaks it in, leave it for about 30 seconds, and then you just remove the paper and the design is on there. Now at the moment, with the light, you can't really see it particularly well. The Little Big Men Studios decals that you get from Victrix do say to use like white on the shields or whatever. It does vary on shield to shield, but I just wanted this one to be a little bit of a dark design, and also just added some matte varnish there as well. However, as cool as those decals are, if you want something a little bit more Rohan themed, I'll have a crack at doing some freehand. So I'm going to freehand a cool Rohan shield design. So I'm going to start off with a couple of U's. So first of all, a smaller U round where that central boss is, and then I'm going to do a slightly larger U just going all the way around on the outside where that actual gold band is, and then kind of like join the two together. And what I'm going to do is just do a couple of coats of thinned down brigade grey. And again, I'm going to make mistakes here. It's going to be a little bit wibbly wobbly in places, but also, you know, it's probably been hand painted by one of the warriors anyway, so it's going to look a little bit wishy-washy in places, which is totally fine. So once I've kind of blocked in that U, I'm going to have to have a crack now at doing the horse's head. So I'll start off with a bit of a like a little A kind of triangle, and then kind of make a horse's face. Now I had a design next to me, which I'll put up on the screen. So I was using that and kept checking it. So if you do see me pause from time to time, it's because I'm constantly checking. So I kind of did this little hooked face design that kind of, from a distance, maybe looked a little bit like a horse's head, because it's supposed to be two horses' heads meeting each other in the center. And again, there's a lot of like going back and forth with like some green, maybe where I've made a mistake, or going back over a little bit like a brighter brigade grey or whatever. But for the most part, is just getting that general shape in place. Again, this is mostly ideal when you're doing the base coat stage, so before you've washed anything. I'd always recommend doing that, but I just wanted to show this as an extra after I'd washed it. Now I'm tying up with a little bit of green here, where I feel like that sort of circular horse detail could do with thinning out in some places where it looks a little bit wibbly wobbly or whatever. And same where that boss is in the center, could just go around and tidy that up a little bit. And then at the very bottom, it's got like this little insert. Well, I guess it's supposed to be the back ends of the horses. So again, I'm just using a little dollop of camouflage green and then just trying to mimic that. Again, it's just to mimic it, to give that sense that it's a Rohan design as opposed to a Saxon design, which kind of fits then and takes this model from being an armoured Saxon to something more Rohan-esque. And there we are. There's our Rohan shield design. 3 different kits painted in the same colour schemes. Obviously 2 of those kits are the same, I guess, faction, because they're Saxons, armoured and unarmoured ones, but they still have a different look. But using that same palette of colours has kind of tied them all together nicely. I based them all the same, which also ties them all together quite nicely as well. Yes, there are some differences there with like a little bit of scale. That's something I did notice when I was painting these models, and you would probably notice from looking at the paint guide as well, that the Victrix models do actually look a little bit bigger than the Rohan one. Initially, I was under the impression that there was a little bit of scale creep. I heard this on the rumour mill, the old drama farm going around the internet, that there was some scale creep with the Rohan Warriors. I've not actually seen it in this situation. Now, a lot of the Victrix stuff is 28mm scale. Sometimes their heads are a little bit bigger, as you could probably see with the stuff in this set. They did seem a little bit larger. That could also be the helmets contributing to that as well. They also have the puddle base. Now, I did actually, when I was building these guys, thought that the Victrix stuff looked bigger, but then I realised they're on those little puddle bases and then mounted them on top of a 25mm base. So they did look a little bit taller than the Rohan figures, but if you start matching the actual feet next to each other, then they kind of look very similar in size. Although I would argue that the Rohan seem a little bit slighter. So what I'm going to do now is do a little bit of a comparison between the sets and my thoughts on them. So I'm going to start first with the Lord of the Rings official set, which is the standard Rohan Warriors, as you'd expect Rohan to look. It's a great set, 24 figures. Now for the 24 figures, it does cost £31.50 from Games Workshop, but if you chop around a bit and go to things like Wayland Games or whatever, then you'll probably be able to pick up a set for like anywhere between 25 quid to 28 quid. So from a kind of, I guess, pound per model, you're looking roughly around about like £1 a figure ish, slightly over, which isn't bad actually. And I was generally shocked by those prices, because normally, well, in the old days when I worked in retail, you would get 24 figures for like £12, then it went up to 15, then it went up to 18. Obviously price rises happen all the time, but then they decided to stop that and then just halve the box, so you ended up getting half the amount of figures for the same amount of cost, and that was quite damaging, I think, for a time. Whereas now it seems to have flipped back round again, and you get quite a lot of figures for a decent amount of money. And I was generally taken aback by that. I mean, obviously some people in the comments going, they're still really expensive. Oh, probably, but from the kit and the quality, I think they're quite reasonable. I was generally shocked by that. You get some decent options. You got bow armed guys. You get enough to make 8 bow guys, 8 spear and shield guys, and then 8 hand weapons. I was originally going to say swords, but they also come with axes, so you get like 4 axes, 4 swords with shields. Now, my big bugbear with this set is you don't, like, if you take a Warcry set, sometimes you get weapon options. So you're like, oh, do I give the guy a spear or do I give the guy a sword? You don't get that in this set. It's either you build them all, but they are basically built as they are in the instructions. Those ones are built as spearmen, those ones are built as bowmen, those ones are built as hand weapons. But with a little bit of kit bashing, you could probably swap like the sword hands around with the spear hands. So it's not really the end of the world if you did want to add a bit of variety to your models. The head fittings, however, go in a very set ways. So maybe in some places you might be able to do a couple of head swaps, but for the large majority, once you built them, that's the pose they're in. And that's one of the big things I started to get a little bit sort of saddened about with like the workshop related kits, is they became very monopose and well, are very monopose, which kind of ruins a little bit of like my side of the hobby. Obviously it's aimed at new entry levels and people getting into hobby. Totally get that, totally on board with it. But for someone like myself who's seen what you can do with both of those things, where you can have the kits that are quite easy to build but also interchangeable, for someone like myself, it's a bit of a shame that, you know, that's become less of a thing these days. But still a great set, still really well sculpted. They look like Rohan. And initially when I first saw the photos when they were like announced, I actually just thought they were just repackaging the old Rohan set. That's how close they are in like vibe and style to the old Rohan. They do match in quite nicely. So when you, let's say you're adding to your existing Rohan army, when they're on the tabletop, you're not going to notice that much difference. Maybe like side by side, there might be some slight difference in sculpting quality, potentially. Certainly from a molding point of view, less chunky sort of like hands, faces, bows. So the technology is obviously improved, as well as the sculpting, I guess. So yes, they do fit in nicely with any existing Lord of the Rings collections, which is a great bonus for me. I hate it when things are added later on, but then look completely different to the stuff that came before it. These fit in quite nicely. They feel right. It's at the right level of what I'd want for my Lord of the Rings stuff to add to my existing Lord of the Rings stuff. So big tick. From a price point of view, the amount of models you get in the set and the quality of them. The only thing I'm not a fan of is the 2-piece head bits where I have to stick a face to a helmet, and also the lack of like weapon choices. I mean, there's probably some space on the sprue, I don't know. Obviously, this is no criticism to the sculptors because there's all the tool inside of it, and obviously the whims of management and whatever. So I totally get where they're at. So this is no dig at anyone in particular. It's just like, it's what I'd want from my sets. I want a little bit more options in there. So all in all, the Rohan set is pretty good value, I would say. So what I'm going to do now is compare the Victrix sets. I'm going to do them both at the same time because they are very similar. It's just you've got armoured ones and unarmoured ones. From the pros and cons point of view, it's pretty much the same. Initially, I was like, oh, 36 models in a set. That's 12 more than the Rohan. Yeah, it's peach maths. Yeah, it's good. And that's true. You do get more models. However, it's £36 for a set of these guys, which works out still £1 a model, which is really good. But in comparison to the Lord of the Rings official Games Workshop set, it's not that much because they're about £1 a model as well. So from a cost point of view, it's about the same. So let's look at the actual models themselves. From a variety point of view, you get a lot of choice. You get a lot of spear arms, you get a lot of sword arms, depending on which body you go with. If you look at the instructions, it goes, you can have these shields, you can have these arms, you can have these heads. All the heads are interchangeable. There's a couple of heads I think that are suited to certain bodies because they're more command based, which makes sense, but you can use the heads wherever you want to. Initially, I was a bit grumpy with the Rohan set because they had like 2-part heads. I was like, my God, why do they do this? But then some of the Victrix ones do that as well. So for those extra details on the model, I guess that's why they've done that. But also with the Victrix ones, you get normal, just one-piece heads as well. So you can mix and match between them. If you can't be bothered to, especially if you've got big fat sausage fingers or whatever like that, like me, and you keep dropping stuff, then maybe just go for the single head models without having to try and like glue a faceplate onto a back of a helm or whatever. But yeah, from a choice point of view, you get a lot more choice in this set. There's a lot more weapon options. The only downside is there's no bows because they're Saxons and armoured Saxons and armoured Saxons. Maybe they've got bows, but in this particular set, you don't get them. And that's fine. I knew that going into this. These are for making shield walls. So, you know, I've made my peace for that. If I wanted some bow arm guys, then I would probably find some kits out there that have bows, maybe use some of my Oathmark models, get some of bow arms from there, stick them on, do a little bit of kit bashing. Very doable. But then maybe I'll just use the Rangers and the Oathmark models in conjunction with these because, again, they're very similar scales. But I'm going slightly off topic there. That is not important. What is important is you do get a lot of options. You just don't get the bow choices, which is totally fine. So that, I guess, is a con. If I was like comparing, I don't get the variety of weaponry that the Rohan set gets, but I do get more variety in the customization of the models. I guess the poses as well, choice of heads, choice of style of weapon, because it's not just a guy holding a sword, but there's a variety of swords, there's a variety of scabbards. I can stick the scabbards roughly where I want to if I don't care about historical accuracy of where they should go on the belt. But you do get a lot of choice of shields, some slightly larger, some slightly smaller. So yeah, from a choice point of view, you get a lot more. So that's where I think the pros kind of get a bit higher on the Victrix set, is I've got more choice for customization. Whereas with the Lord of the Rings set, once I built 12 models from that set, if I build another 12 from that set, they become identical twins. And then if I want to get more sets to add to it, I start to get more identical twins. Which if you're doing like wargaming, you're not fussed about that, it's not a problem. But for someone like me who likes the narrative game and I want everyone to look a little bit different, I want to know who's, you know, doing all right and remember that guy for the next battle. Like, oh, that guy in that pose, he did well. Those ones are rubbish. They always die. I know those, so I'm going to stick them at the front so they get killed straight away. That's sometimes the thing for me, is I like to also, when I'm building, I like to build a narrative in the build as well. So maybe there's a bunch that are loading bows, maybe there's a bunch that are shooting bows, which then adds like a vibe of like, this is like the ones that look like they're moving on the side, this one looks like they're holding back and firing. I don't know why, it's just something I like to do, and the Victrix set definitely gives me that choice, which is great. Now, the other thing I did notice with the Victrix set is they do feel bigger, even by 28mm standards, and I think that's more the heads and helmets that do that. I don't think it's really the bodies and the hands and stuff. The very early Victrix stuff, especially like the Napoleonic stuff, was quite pudgy fingers, quite pudgy faces, whereas as the years have gone on, their sculpting has become mega, and I really like seeing the stuff that they put out. I mean, I've recently got some of the Greeks that they've done, I've got some of the Rus which I still need to build, but yeah, again, all these things will fit so well into all my other games that I do, which is perfect. But yeah, they did look a little bit larger in comparison to the Rohan. Again, as I said at the start, might be down to the puddle base, but I also think the helmets kind of add that extra bit of chunk to the look. But you know, with them being slightly larger, makes them slightly easier to paint. That's a win for me. I'm okay with that. Made my peace with that. When I mix them all together as well, not everybody's built the same. Not everybody's the same size and scale. So actually having a few models that look a little bit larger here and there actually kind of works for me. So I'm okay with that. What I did find interesting was when I painted everything together using a very similar palette. Yes, one I sprayed silver because he had more armor on it, and the other two I sprayed green because they had more cloth. When they're all painted and I did like little shield designs and stuff, they actually, once they're all based, they kind of match quite well. So I am quite chuffed with the fact that I could easily drop these unarmored Saxons into a Rohan army without them feeling too disjointed from the narrative of like Lord of the Rings. Now, some of our diehard fans out there are like, no, it's got to be from the movies. Totally get that, totally respect that. Not going to poo-poo that idea. I like to add things to mine. And when you look back at a lot of the Rohan stuff, like Aragorn wears a big mail shirt at Helm's Deep. I mean, my guy here with his like big mail shirt, could be the same mail shirt, could be made by the same armourer or whatever. So, and especially with the War of the Rohirrim stuff, a couple of, I think it's 100 years in the past, to do with hammer hands. So maybe the style of armor's changed. Maybe they didn't wear as many cloaks. Do they always wear cloaks? You know, when it gets to summer, are they still wearing those cloaks in summer, or are they taking those cloaks off and just showing the tunics and their chainmail? Don't know. So actually having these other options of different style warriors kind of works for me. So big fan of mixing official kits with not official and historical models and then seeing what I can get from it. Let me know what your thoughts are, because I mean, obviously I've rambled on about what I think, but I'd be interested to see what you guys think as well, because you might not agree with me at all, and that is totally fine. You might go, no, Games Workshop all the way, or no, those models aren't reasonably priced, Peachy, you're talking nonsense. I kind of think they are, but that's just from my experience of lots of unreasonable prices, I guess. Maybe a bit of Stockholm syndrome there, don't know. But in comparison to the Victrix stuff, I think they're all on par with each other from a cost point of view versus a quantity point of view. So that was really interesting. That did actually surprise me. I was generally surprised by the cost per model from both companies. I was expecting Workshop to be a little bit more expensive. Pans out, not. It's great. But yeah, as always, thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you got something useful from it, whether that's from a painting point of view, or like if you're on the fence about, do I get these Rohan guys? I mean, now I've seen them painted, they look quite cool. Maybe you're on the fence about, do I mix in some historical stuff with my Rohan stuff? You know, the options are there. And once you've got, like, I mean, there's 36 models in a Victrix set. Once you've like painted up 12, maybe you're like, that's it, I'm done. But what do I do with these other 24? Add them to Oathmark, add them to Rangers of the Shadow Deep, Frostgrave, whatever. That's what I'm going to do. I've got a load of choices now, and that's what I'm going to do with the Rust, because they're going to be barbarians. I've got all these armoured and armoured dudes, which will count as soldiers for Frostgrave, or maybe even do a big unit of like human warriors for like Oathmark down the line, as well as like I am going to probably paint them in the same vein as the Rohan stuff, so maybe use the Rohan. Maybe I might paint the Rohan stuff in different colours and use them in Oathmark. I don't know. But yeah, the world is our oyster, so to speak. But yeah, you can do what you want. That's the great thing about painting, is it's your choice. It's your money. You do what you want with it. You paint them how you want. Don't let anyone else, including me, tell you how to do your hobby. Have fun and enjoy it. As always, a massive thank you to these beautiful people. Thank you so much for supporting me. Technically, this is my second video of 2025. I guess my review was meant to be done on New Year's Day or New Year's Eve, but I kind of like put it a little bit after, which is totally fine. So this is my second video, a bit of a painting video, I guess, is quite nice to ease into the new year. So thank you for your support. Thank you for watching and getting this far. Listen to me rambling on. But if you are interested in joining the Patreon, I have a few different tiers. I have the top tier, which is like doing some one-to-one tuition. If you want some tips, like 2 hours sat down with Peachy as he talks through some speed painting or some army painting techniques, or just painting in general. The only things I don't really tend to focus on is non-metallic metals and airbrushing, because I'm not qualified in those. I'm not as good. There's plenty of other people out there that are good at that. So if you did want some tuition, do consider that. But I've got a great community on Discord, and the Patreon family is amazing. So, and also it gets you a free ticket to PeachCon, which will be happening again this year. I'll get more details on that later. But regardless of that, I am now going to go and light the beacons and hope Gondor comes to my aid and rescue Minas Peachith from the orc hordes that are battering at the front door. I say that, it's probably my son trying to get in from school. Don't know why he is. I should have gone and picked him up. Anyway, love you, bye.